about scaffolding, and scaffolding is, I'm sure, something that you're already doing without realizing that you're doing it. So what scaffolding means is that you're providing the supports for the student to access the language. So those are things like visual cues, like for example, this is how many letters are in my name. And so we have 8, 7, 6, all the way to 3. So all the kids, of course, participate in writing their name and then how many letters. And it's up here for them to access learning the numbers, learning the letters, and learning about bats. Here is a KWL chart, so what they know already, and then you're accessing their prior knowledge, what they want to know, and then at the end of the unit, what did they learn? And of course this one is so cute, it's done in the shape of a bat, so when they're learning about bats. So that it really makes it come to life, and it makes it very visual for them. And of course here with the spiders, so learning about different animals, different insects. As well as another scaffolding technique is to use body language. So the more expressive that you can be, you say, smile, this is a smile, and you're showing it, the kids really start to understand, oh yes, smile is this. You have to sometimes do a little bit of movement, have the kids get up and, mime something, mimic something. When I'm teaching vocabulary, often I use total physical response where, for example, we're learning geography. And so I say, okay, Michigan, looks like a glove. Everybody show me the glove. And so what lake is over here where the thumb is on the glove? And then they have to show the lake. Oh, I know that lake. What lake is over here? So they have to get out of their seat. They're saying it. They're moving at the same time. So the more senses that you're introducing to the student, when they hear it and they see it and they're kinesthetically they're moving, the better they'll remember it.
And many of us do. So one of the things that's really important with visuals is just kind of put them into context. So we're learning about rocks in the rock cycle, and I put some visuals up. They put some questions and some responses and some thoughts behind them. Also when learning new vocabulary, I'll say paleontologist, and we'll have some visuals up there. And I'll do a lot of TPR, which is called total physical response, and pretty much it's associating kind of body movement and associating to what they're learning. So for example, when we learned about geology, we talked about different landforms, and we used our hand as a basis of remembering that important vocabulary, such as mountains and plains. And we learned the valleys, because the valleys are between the mountains, which was a lot of fun for them. We also learned peninsula. Actually, this was taught to me by a second grader last year. She was like, look, Maya said peninsula, and they'll never forget that. I randomly have kids come up to me and they go, peninsula. So total physical response is super important to kind of glue that vocabulary into their brain. We learned about it now. And front loading is about giving them kind of what they're going to be learning about ahead of time. So one of the ways that you can do front loading or anticipatory set is by giving them visuals. Let them see what they're going to be. Let them explore. Let them question. KWL is also a great way to front load. Front loading vocabulary, important vocabulary, is really important. Ask them to tell you what they think it means based on the TPR that you're using in class, or the total physical response movements. So again, front loading is really important. Front loading vocabulary when doing read alouds. Some words that you know that are really important that they're going to be encountering that they might not necessarily know. So I hope that's helpful. With one another. So this is called comunicate, which means communicate, and it's just sentence frames for them to learn social language. Like, can you please not do that again? I didn't like when you did that. I want to be your friend. So positive as well as just really positive social language.
So it's so important when you're teaching language learners to have them work often in teams so that they can support one another. And the kids that are still in the silent stage, they're not comfortable using that language, they can really hear more of the language and they can repeat the model of their peers. So here they've done some teamwork. They were learning about bariletes, which are kites, circular kites that they make in different Latin American countries to celebrate Day of the Dead. And the kids worked together, and of course they put visuals and they wrote together, and then they presented to the whole class, and actually in this case they presented to the school. So there's a purpose for the language learning. and you practice it 2 or 3 times, and it wasn't a boring, monotonous job. They were so excited to make the poster and to present it and to use the language. And here's an example of in-group work. They also built the barilete, like a small model of it. And they had to learn all the names of all the materials, from straws to tape to pipe cleaners, in Spanish. So this really helps them to learn the language and make it concrete for them. And here was another group that did fiambre, which is a type of food. It's a salad that they make in Guatemala and other Latin American countries. And it's very traditional. So these students in particular are not as comfortable using the language, but here they really got motivated and they were so excited to make their presentation. And they learned more Spanish in this than they would in, of course, during an EC work time.
There's, again, some more sentence frames on the door that say, can I go to the bathroom, using correct language? Can I borrow it after you? And it's not necessarily for only those kids that don't know how to say it, but it's also for those kids that need that social language, and also for their manners, to be able to speak correctly. Like, instead of give me that, it's can I borrow it after you? So it works for all levels of language learning.
So whenever you have language learners, it's so important to give them the sentence starters, the vocabulary, and not just every once in a while, but every day. They should have access to it, whether it be in a notebook in their desk or visually on the walls. So here we have the questioning words, cuando, when, and it has, of course, the question mark and que. And it also, when they're spelling it, they see that, oh, it has accents, and that's the way you use it. And it's very clear to them so that they can really become proficient, because these are the who, what, when, where, and why, so important in their language. And everything else is up here. It has visuals. So these are all, in 3rd grade, we're learning all the different verb conjugations. So these are the most basic, most commonly used verbs in Spanish. Estar, to be, or to go, ir, and then ser, also to be, but it's a different form. So when it's up here, the kids, when they're writing, they can access and say, oh, what tense am I using? Who is speaking? So they can come up here at any time during Writer's Workshop, and they can access these. Then, of course, here, there's some mathematical language, and we have the English up here for them. And because in the United States, they need to learn the names of it in English. Penny and nickel, dime, quarter, half dollar, dollar. Sometimes you just have to put that vocabulary up there, even though it is Spanish immersion, and 90% of their day is in Spanish. But some things we just don't translate. So, and here we have the shapes, and of course, there's about 2 or 3 different objects to go with each shape, and the numbers. So it's always up and it's available for them, for their spelling, for their writing. And then we have some geography terms, and this one's in English, because I think it was important for them to learn a lot of the vocabulary in English. So they already know it in Spanish, so then they can access it in English, and it's all visual here for them.
Quickly about what we've been talking about, just to overview its elements of good language instruction. One of the most important things that I think that any teacher can give to any language learner would be a positive classroom climate. And we all work on communities in our classroom. It's no different with language learners. They can read your body language. They know when you smile what it means. They know those things are universal. They cross language barriers. I would just say treat them as you would any other kid, with respect, with love and kindness, and that is going to get you very far. Also with correcting language is another big piece of language learning. The more that you speak clearly, the better. For them, not necessarily slow it down, but definitely clearer for them, providing them with sentence frames for them to learn social language, for them to refer to. Have it up in your classroom. It helps everybody learn just correct manners and just how to say, how to speak clearly. So I think that's really important. Yep. Anything? What else?
So just remember that students are active learners. So when you're providing a basis for them to engage with one another, to use the language, then they will listen to the language, hear the models, and practice it. Even if they're initially in that silent mode, they're hearing it and they will participate when they start to get more comfortable. So cooperative groups are important. So be flexible in your grouping, sometimes homogeneous, sometimes heterogeneous, depending on the task, so that kids who do have that language can provide it to the kids that don't yet have that language. And then pair share is a really important technique. So when you're teaching, at any point, you really want them to process it and to use that language. You stop and you say, okay, I'd like you to pair share. So turn to a neighbor and talk about what we just talked about. Use the vocabulary that I just used. Have them share. Then they can really feel part of the lesson and they're using that language.
And part of using that language would be just creating that environment where it's safe to take risks. I think is really important. And the way that you do that is really just being positive with your students and letting them know, you know, we all make mistakes. It's okay to show an error. Oh, teacher made a mistake. Mm-hmm. It's part of language learners. We're all kind of language learners, just at different levels.
And that is important, a point you brought up too. I intentionally sometimes make mistakes. Mm-hmm. When you're writing or when you're speaking, you say, oh, you know, that's a common mistake. Even you might make that sometimes. And then they can see that, oh, no one's perfect. And even the teachers make mistakes. So take a risk, and they'll feel comfortable taking a risk in class.
And ownership of their learning, you know, like I think you talked about reference materials. Let them figure out what resources in the classroom can I use. I can use a 100 chart. I know where that is. I'm going to use it. I can use the sentence frames. I'm going to use them. Mm-hmm. I can use a dictionary. I know where they're at. Right. That's, you know, taking control of your own so much with motivation, and that's a big key step to getting language learners learning.
And that's why it's so important to keep the visuals up for them, not just the day that you're teaching it, but all the time, especially during that unit. So you can see we have the continents over there. So that's up, and the whole time that you're learning continents, the children can access that vocabulary and use it anytime.
And the important thing is that they know that they can use it. It's not cheating. It's actually, I tell them, actually that's what I want you to use. I want you to know where to find that. It's good for them to know where the resources are.